Hi everyone, my name is Kate Emerald, the founder of Life of Emerald. Life of Emerald is for your mind, body, and soul, a simple and practical lifestyle to promote both physical and mental well being. It is an online studio scaling global impact by spreading world knowledge, spirituality, and cultures. Global Healing Movement 2020 is dedicating to mental health advocacy. And our guest today is Janine Walkins. Hi,
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me today.
it is our pleasure, Janine.
It's an honor on my side, too.
Janine was born and raised in California, and she currently lives in Minnesota. Shortly after moving to New York City, she met the love of her life while working as a field engineer at New York City's LaGuardia Airport. Civil engineer by trade, she was willing to trade it to become an author, fitness instructor, and world traveler. She says life feels magical. It has taken Janine about 5 years to publish the first book, and her journey as an author is far from over. Janine's hope is that Sonder's Saga instills in all of its readers the curiosity about what our world would look like if we were 100% responsible for ourselves in our pursuit of happiness. Um, yes, Janine,
Yes.
let's jump into our first question
Yeah.
and let's discover more about your book and your worldview, okay?
Great.
Please, Janine, share with our audience how you contribute your talent and time to the world.
Well, thank you for asking that because I sometimes I do still question it myself. Although what I used to consider it was building a safer and better environment for areas that people were coming to visit as an engineer. And now the world by sharing my mental and physical exercises that people can come and learn with me through practicing with me and then practicing in their own time as a fitness instructor and author. I'm consistently adding to my own strength by becoming independent and dependable in every area of my life in all facets. Because I believe that you can achieve this as a human being. It is my responsibility to become as capable as I can for those around me and for myself. And as I come into contact with people, I inspire and I hope I contribute to their ability to be aware of this within themselves so they can start striving towards it for themselves too.
Mhm. Yeah, I am curious about the new way of us becoming. As you say, we're here to become sustainable, self-sustainable, independent.
Yeah.
Dependent. Can you speak to us a little bit more about that in the time where codependency is very unique, prevalent, and we don't even know we're codependent on each other. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so with the role I used to play as an engineer, one of the biggest things that we did have was becoming sustainable and having practice that are more sustainable within how we interact with our world. Construction is a field that still is very heavily involved in taking projects or taking locations and making them a more up to date or more accessible facet for people, but a lot of times we don't see the behind the scenes of like how much waste is disposed of, how much demolition is taken away and can't be recycled. And so it was something that was obviously in my mind for the 5 years that I was working as a field engineer. And I realized that outside of construction, when I drive around, it's not just in that industry, it's in the way that we consume. A lot of times in the field, we look for things that are recyclable, or we look at ways that we can have wasted material be reused, but we don't think about it very often in our day-to-day lives. We think about like fast food and we will eat a meal, but then we have all of this leftover, or will go shopping and buy a bunch of clothes or buy accessories, but then after we're done with the ones that no longer serve us, sometimes we'll donate it, but a lot of times people just throw it away. And I became very aware of this because one of my lifestyle choices that I do have is the way that I eat. I am a plant-based person, And a lot of what I see gets more wasted is like byproducts or what isn't consumed. And a lot of what I'm realizing that does get consumed and then wasted is sometimes someone's entire livelihood of whether it's within the world of food, whether it's in the world of like clothing or shelter. And a lot of times I wasn't aware of this. As an American, we kind of put things into a trash can and then we just know it's going to be taken away. Last year, and I know we were kind of basically talking about this right before this interview, but a year ago I was in Thailand and doing a lot of my backpacking treks. I do see a lot more of it isn't necessarily just passed away in a garbage can and you don't see it again. It literally does sometimes end up on a street or ends up in a river, and it's not something that we think about on a day-to-day basis. But if we could have a world where we are impacting it and having less of a carbon footprint, or we're impacting it and having less of a people too. It's not just material things. Sometimes it is a mental footprint we leave. If we could find a way where we were having things grow more than things like deteriorate, I feel like this would be a more acceptable way of living, because I feel like so often what we're really feeling with this separation of what is going on in the world is having us feel like the way that we're living is completely acceptable. And I'm starting to discover even within myself that there is so much that I pass on the side and consider like a byproduct or okay to do. And I'm discovering within myself like how much I would almost consider it baggage or stuff that we no longer want to deal with. A lot of times we'll push it off, and that's not acceptable, at least on my level anymore. I'm becoming very forefront in recognizing how much I'm creating and how much of that can actually continue to grow versus how much I create and I'm at least stagnant. So at least with me, I'm trying to become as sustainable in not only my creation of thought, but also my creation of what is around this world.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And as I'm listening, there's animals, just noises in the background, so I'm putting my headphone on. And yes, carbon footprint is absolutely an important topic to talk about, especially in America. And I went to school in Arizona in 2009, 2000-ish, and I remember vividly my professor saying, comparing America, right? America wastes 4 times the amount of some of the Asian countries. And I thought that was interesting. And living in America, I recognized some of the loose grip of looking at the importance of a material because there's so abundantly many. And but that creates some loop to the waste, and we don't even see it. And it's important that, it's interesting that you're talking about it right now as you're living in America, and you're in a way you're advocating for minimalism. This is true. Yeah.
Very much so, because another thing that I do take as a pride icon is realizing like how much stuff that I can consume as an American and be like, I don't even care about this. It's my right. And I'm realizing that that is a mindset that people actually have in America, and they're not joking about it. And it is kind of profound to know that we have created a universe. We've created a world within like humanity that allows certain countries to do that. Although other countries, it's taboo or they do have laws against it, and their people don't cry out about it because they know, I know as an American, that this is something that has been allowed. And it is kind of bizarre that in other parts, like they've had to accept it as, okay, well, they're allowed to do that. But if you really think about like what America's biggest like export is, at least in this day and age, and I don't want to get political about it, but one of the campaign members that I was really supporting really pointed it out. Like, as Americans, like, our biggest expo right now is our data, and it's our ability to consume. And so if you're thinking about those two things being like the things that we're exporting, like, why do we have so much actual material waste? Like, it blows my mind that when you go through like a recycling company right now, they have like different types that have like numbers 1 through 5, and some people won't even take them even though they have the recycling label on it, because they're products that actually can't be recycled by specific recycling bins, and it or recycling companies, and certain places won't take it. So it's like, why did we create a product as America? Why did we create products that actually aren't sustainable, knowing that you could get those products becoming recyclable? But it then comes down to like this idea behind like this dollar or this amount to like um, make your own product more beneficial for you, and then removing the ability to make it beneficial for the world. And I do think it is our responsibility, knowing that we've been allowed to live this way, that this is something that we should consider, and we should start taking action towards it, because this world is crying out for it right now.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. Let's jump into our second question. We want to get to know you a little bit more behind your philosophy, and I hear your care for the environment and see the need for upgrade to in terms of looking at the waste in the product we use, and
Yeah.
come from a caring place. I can feel it. So could you tell us one or two personal story which has shaped your worldview today?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I do realize I get so involved with the actual idea of like products and consuming, and that goes to another level. But we'll continue with that. So at least with my personal stories that have shaped them, and this is actually a huge part that happened within the book. Um, One of my biggest, and it still is like kind of jarring, because I'm still not sure where I land on it even right now, was the idea of marriages. When I was 12, my parents went through a what people would consider a typical divorce, where now neither of my parents still talk, and this is many years later. Um, but it was this idea that was formed that marriages were more of a practice that just created codependency, and that, in my mind, negatively influences the next generation subconsciously. Because regardless of people getting divorced because they themselves have finally gotten to a point where they no longer want to be together, it's what is said about the people that are no longer together around the next generation or their children. Because I feel like parents and guardians so often, when they are together, what they love to have the children recognize is like, you're supposed to love them, you're supposed to respect them. And in my mind, it's also recognizing that they're the authority. And so what you're not supposed to do with authority is ever disobey or ever go against it, even though authority so often, especially right now out in the media, it allows you to question a lot of their righteousness of it. Because a lot of times I feel like it's very hypocritical when you really watch how authority acts, but then they want you to act. And so, speaking from my own bias, I do relate a lot of marriages with children, not specifically marriages without children, to an idea of like two authority figures coming together, and wanting everyone to agree to coexist, without becoming emotionally attached. And at the same time, they try to have it where it's an ability to financially become involved, but then if it were to go bad, then they want everything to just work out in their favor without the other person getting anything. So my biggest world view that was first skewed at age 12 was this idea of marriage, because prior to that, I believe I was living like I would consider it the most like princess type lifestyle. My father is a plastic surgeon by trade. My mother was a stay at home. And once they divorced after 20 years of marriage with 5 children, 3 of my older sisters ended up going with my dad, whereas me and my brother ended up going with my mom. And so all of a sudden, what really disrupted a lot of my world view was that marriage was supposed to keep families together. But when marriages ended, how often it could just have an entire life be like shaken apart. And again, being 12 years old at this time, it had me really disrupted with what was actually allowed, because what I thought was fair and what I wanted was no longer being listened to. So that was one of my biggest things, was this fear of marriage, which again, had you'd mentioned, at least with my introduction, I am now in love with a beautiful man that I was willing to trade my complete independence with, and being an engineer in New York, to try to have a relationship and a loving time in my life with. So I feel like I've disrupted that, at least with my first worldview. And then the second one, which kind of goes hand in hand with it, was this idea that racism was over. I say it with a smile now, because I remember leaving my comfort of La Jolla. So for people who don't know, La Jolla is considered like the jewel of Southern California. And it was where my dad originally started his practice as a plastic surgeon. And that was beautiful. When my parents got divorced, we moved to a place called Joshua Tree, which is a very desert. So going from ocean to desert was a huge transition. Although when I lived in La Jolla, I really did believe that racism was over. I remember me and my friend Amanda Martin used to talk about how we were so glad that Martin Luther King did everything he did so we could still be friends. And I come from a mixed family. For people who don't know me, my dad is Nigerian and my mom is Irish. And so when I moved to a place called Joshua Tree with my Caucasian looking mom, and me and my younger brother looked very mixed, it came to a lot of people's mindset that we were no longer to be treated the way that we had always seen ourselves, as equals. And I went through quite a shock, when all of a sudden, not only did my financial status change, but all of a sudden people took my color as something that had me no longer be treated as an equal. Um, and so with me, one of my biggest world changes was shaped when I was considered a minority. I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, we're all the same age. Why do you think I'm different? So I grew up as a teenager having to understand that I needed to have a mental toughness, for people who wanted me to have less self-worth, just because the way that I looked. And so those were 2 areas that really got shaped, was the idea that marriage wasn't for true love, and the idea that racism really did live in the hearts of some people who were just really angry and couldn't see past color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, these two things you mentioned are very interwoven in our society, and you've gone through, and I mean, looking at the marriage as a systematic thing from a young child, and arriving at the conclusion that marriage does not sustain love, and in that sense, marriage is an institutional thing
Yeah.
that really binds us to look cannot we cannot look beyond that construct of thinking. But when we really started, your mom and dad really started with love, and
Yeah.
so that was interesting. And the racism in America, I completely understand that notion of, I am the same, but why are you treating me unique, like different? And that it can create like confusion, right? It
Yeah.
was confusion. Okay. Janine, I want to go back to the marriage idea. This is very interesting and timely for the world and our audience. Have you heard of conscious uncoupling?
I have not. No, what is that?
Conscious uncoupling is when a couple come together to agree mutually that their marriage no longer works, and they want to mutually, respectfully, and lovingly honor each other by taking this conscious uncoupling step, consciously walking away from each other with love and acceptance that sometimes our journey ends ends, and that's okay.
That is beautiful. I have not heard of that.
Yeah, if you had your mom and dad known about the way of conscious uncoupling, it could be you might have a unique different story around that breakage of the three siblings, the two siblings, and all that. And
Yeah.
I think this is a great point to raise awareness to for our audience. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that key point.
No, thank you for letting me know, because I'm going to be honest, and I know I was sharing with you last time when we had spoken that at least with the next few parts of my book, like I'm still going through some of these conversations. So that actually could be something that I'm still discovering. So thank you. Couple conscious uncoupling.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, and yeah, so the racism part, your mm, your it helped you become mentally strong, you say?
That's correct. Yeah.
Let's jump into our third question, might be related to this. What is your understanding of the current state of planet Earth or the collective consciousness?
I'm glad, because this kind of does circle back to like the first question, because I realize like how much I do care about like sustainability and how everything in this world is really like calling to us. So my current understanding is that at least as planet Earth, Mother Nature, it really needs humans to become responsible for our own lives, um, because it needs to recharge, recenter itself. It needs to come back to its own state of well-being. And us inhabiting it right now, we're depleting it on such a gross level of just like not even caring. Like I do think it's interesting how often we do things and don't even show gratitude for what has to give life or what needs to um, change its life, for us to sustain our ways of living. And we do it because, again, at least in my experience, is like we do feel like we are owed it, and it's time for us to start practicing that. I know very often, like at least in my experience too, when I was 12 and like we had to move, like we don't like to move, we don't like change as humans. So why do we think it is so easy for us to just justify why plants or pets or other people have to up and change their lives just to allow us to contain or sustain our amount of satisfaction? So at least with Mother Nature and just planet Earth, we live with this underlying human conditioning that we deserve more than what we create, and we continue to live these lives perpetuating this disconnect of recognizing our role, and how we are destroying the planet. And if we eventually do come to a place where the world isn't able to sustain us anymore, we have no one to blame but ourselves. And again, this comes from like the first question when you'd ask, like certain countries, I do feel play a bigger role in this. It's not fair to say that other continents or other countries are playing a bigger role than, again, I'm going to take a lot of responsibility for America, because the way that we live, we've exported most of our ability to create. Like we literally have become a consuming country, and that just justifies more of the reason why the rest of the world is also allowing their worlds or their lands to become forest for vegetation, or why they've allowed their rivers to become like so muddied or so murky, because they look at like what is going to be consumed later. They've turned into these imports and are always looking for exports. And again, we're here for it because that's what we do. We buy and we purchase, and we don't even think about what is going to be the byproduct or what is going to be depleted because of what we wanted as our quick consumption of whatever makes us feel satisfied. And I do believe that we are all connected because, again, there's no real difference between what is being consumed versus what is being created. And if we can just become more conscious of both parts of the play, like there is a duality that I really feel like invokes all of us. And as much as we think we are individuals, and we're living individual lives, I feel like it's an individual light shining from a beam of an entire infinite being, and that comes to the collected consciousness. And with that, what I consider all of these different individual lights, I call them Sonder lights, because the definition literally comes from a dictionary of obscure sorrows, where we recognize that everyone is a Sonder light. And it just means that everyone is living their infinite and unique life, regardless of our awareness of it. And I think that is one of the reasons that my book is so intentional with its name. Like, the idea is not original and my thoughts are not unique. I'm just someone who's starting to voice it in a way that I'm becoming 100% responsible for my own life. And I think that is something that is pretty profound, because the more I am talking with people about what it means for us to make a better world or leave the planet a better place than when we first came on, as much as we talk about it, I'm starting to find people who are living like that too, because for the first time since I left New York City, I'm starting to do that too. And like you had mentioned, like the idea of becoming a minimalist doesn't mean that I'm trying to like unload my life. It means that I'm trying to fill my life with as much stuff as I had, just in a way that it's more of like the memories and it's more of the conversations and not necessarily the materialistic items or the waste. It's me learning how to live this life on a planet that is sustainable and wants its own creatures to be just as independent as it is.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Yes. Hmm. It's like going from, there's a disconnect in society where we get caught up in this cycle of consuming and throwing away because I no longer need, and consuming more, and then it creates whole like a big pile of trash. We don't know what to do with it. But the connection with that is us recognizing that it is time where the product, how much energy was spent and resources was spent making a product that we attach a sentimental value, and we hold so loosely, and we don't see how much sacred energy was put into making the product, and then we end up throwing it away, and then this becomes a waste. And so you are pointing out the disconnect in our consciousness or our awareness that is indeed a result of so much suffering. We're not doing it intentionally, but we lost. For some humanity is lost right now. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I love that the way that I tried to say it, I'm so glad the way you said it, because like, yeah, it's just that disconnect of like the human conditioning. Like that's all it is like we forget that there's like a darkness between like, we get it, something happened, we had it, something else happened, and now it's gone. But like nothing actually, and that's the greatest thing. There's like the 3 laws behind energy, and I learned it in physics way back, but it's the idea that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, just moved. And just because it's moved out of your life doesn't mean it doesn't still have its own life. It's still there. It's not, maybe it's not human, maybe it's not even like I don't know, like a, maybe it doesn't have sentient life, but just because you considered it trash, and there's that whole thing that it might be someone else's treasure, but what if everyone just sees it as trash? It doesn't mean it just disappears. It's still there. And just becoming aware of it.
Yeah, becoming aware of it is very important. It disappears because it out of our sight, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It is still there. Let's look at it. Oh, yeah, we have a lot to learn, and the fact that you passionately, with your background in civil engineering, speaking about this is very sacred. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for creating this space and having this as a conversation topic. Because the other thing that I realize a lot of times is because I'm not in the meetings anymore about how sustainable about this project. Like, what are we doing to take steps forward? Like, just because I wrote a book, and it's like, it's realizing that it's like the echoed message that I've always kind of invoked. But now that I'm having conversations like with you, Kate, about this and realizing that there's so many different ways to have these types of platforms, like us realizing like mentally, like how aware are we of this? Because the other thing that I'm realizing, and I'm starting to have more like connections with it, is like, how often are we looking at things and saying that's trash, and then realizing on a different level, and I know this is like a little bit more profound, but realizing how often you're able to say that to something else, and then reflecting and realizing that that's still part of you. Like, how often do we actually have these conversations about ourselves and say that's trash, or that's not important, or that's not good? Like, how many parts of us do we actually see and see as treasure? Because I'm going to be honest, the more I'm realizing how much stuff I'm able to recycle through myself, I'm realizing how often the reflection of how this world is really represents how we are. And that's why I'm taking these steps.
Yeah, how we are inside reflects how we act outside, and there's inter dynamic. There's an interplay here, and including the notion of codependency. There's an interplay. That there's a loop that's playing between two people, and until we realize that we are independent and self-sustainable on our own, then this codependency will manifest as if we're, again, looking at that trash, right? This is not this is my trash, this is not my trash, because there's a disconnect. And the disconnect here is that not of forgetting we are an independent sovereign being, number one. And secondly, we're forgetting that energy, I mean, out of sight, out of mind, is completely false.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this. And let's go to the fourth question.
Okay.
Please, can you please share one simple, practical thing that our audience can implement in their lives right now?
Okay, I'm gonna sum it up in like a sentence, but I promise I'll go into it. One practical thing that everyone in the audience can take away, and I really hope that we all start practicing it, whether we share it or whether we forget it later, but it's to have the willingness to understand at least one other person's different point of view, because I really do think that's the key in this universe. And I'm not saying that you have to alter your opinion or even agree with them, but just to have the awareness that there is always at least one other point of view other than your own, that is profound. Because understanding that there are different points of view, like that's the first step, but taking it a step further and letting it become just as valid, if not more valid than yours. Like, there's like small ones and bigger ones. Like, one of the tricks that I will usually say to people if they've never like thought about like, oh, I have to be willing to understand, like that's okay, like I can understand. But as soon as something comes up that it's like, do you floss before you brush your teeth, or do you brush your teeth and then floss? And then there's some people who don't even floss at all. Like, there's so many different ways to do it, and like that's just like something that's very small. Or like, if you eat Oreos, some people don't even eat Oreos, but if you eat Oreos, like, do you twist it and then lick it? Do you eat the icing? Do you not even twist it, you just dip it? Like, there's so many different ways to see it, and these are like just fun little ones. But then we come to like more serious conversations about, do you allow your children or your friends to date people who are of a different religion or of a different race? And all of a sudden, then everything opens up. And it's like, if we could just go back to the key of understanding that you are a person who has your own ways of thinking, and that is totally cool, because you are the only person who probably thinks every one opinion of yours. Because again, there go from like really important conversations to ones that people would consider less important. Like I gave you two less important examples, and then a pretty dramatic one that for someone who comes from a mixed family, like that is something that I didn't think was a question, because when I was born into this world, I wasn't told that there were people who are only one race. I came in, I was automatically two. And realizing that that's different for everyone. So when it comes to like different opinions, recognizing that there are a lot of different ones. And in all these different opinions, look at yourself and realize that as much as you think yours is 100% right, just try to see someone who thinks completely different of you and see their point as 100% right. And you don't have to do it very often, but the more you do it, the more open you become. Because if you only think about your opinion as right, you get stuck in an echo chamber. And if you think that, then you're always going to think you have the absolute truth. And I feel like that will have us miss out on this idea of what a human experience is. Because the idea behind humanity is realizing that there are infinite rays of light and they're all shining their own truths. And if we're willing to have like that movement and growth, just think about how much you can expand in your understanding of what your opinions are. Rather than dismissing another person's idea, acknowledge it, that it has some type of validation. It might not be 100% what you agree, but it has some type of validation. And for them, again, maybe they just come from a totally different point of view than you. So if you are willing to acknowledge this, you'll grow in wisdom. And the more you see different people who speak different languages, who have different belief like backgrounds or pedestals, or however you see it. Some people, they don't even have one. Like me and my brother, for a long time, we actually were atheists. And just realizing that even though they think differently, it's just as equally valued, because they are a human being. And human beings are beautiful because we have the ability to understand one another when we're willing to communicate. So if you're willing to understand this, you will grow in whatever expansion of wisdom that you allow yourself to. And the more you expand, the more wisdom you will gain, because you're willing to be in someone else's world. And with that, you'll have more respective views and experiences, and you'll have different echoes that you can then share with other people. And I hope that everyone who listens to this has the ability and the willingness to have that understanding, because the universe needs us to go out and start sharing our experiences, because there's too many people in echo chambers that think they have absolute truth, and it's keeping us disconnected from recognizing how much that the world and this planet wants us to understand. So with that, I guess my biggest piece of advice is just being willing to understand, especially from a different point of view, and then realizing that that point of view is actually part of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned echo chamber.
Yeah.
And this is a choice and a cultural conditioning. And you know, I'm really curious about like America, like improving America. I mean, understanding that things are just the way it is, like perfect as is. And on that layer, there is a room for evolution for everybody. And looking at America, there's so many various types of people and their worldviews, and it's very, very beautiful in that there's diversity in America, and at the same time, there's definitely disparaging views and opinion. Then that there's a tendency to clash. And looking I mean, overall, looking at America, there is polarity. It's bigger. There's a bigger polarity in this country than in Asia, one Asian country. My question to you, maybe you can touch on briefly, is if we're all one and we want the same, which is love and like safety and stability, protection, what could be the fundamental thing that Americans can unite in one in order to meet opposing viewpoint? I mean, people with opposing viewpoints. Like people's opposing viewpoints are a second layer of the fundamental human need. And what is that? Do you follow me?
I do.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting because at least in my mind, and I've struggled with this so much because again, like being born in La Jolla and like just thinking that my life was like just I literally, and it's funny because like my dad still talks to me about it like in the way that he thought it was hilarious. He knew what it was like to go through race. I mean, he's a plastic surgeon who's black, and so for him most of his career, he was pretty much at the time growing up, like was told he was not going to be able to do that. But he had very strong family members who said he was going to. And then even knowing what it was like for my parents to be dating at that time, like it was not a good time for my parents who were in a mixed relationship to be in a relationship. So one of my things that my dad always told me he prided himself on was creating a bubble for us kids that we would have not known racism, which I'm like, congratulations, Dad, you succeeded. And then when it burst, I didn't have you around. So I did blame him for a lot of stuff for a long time. Um, what I would say helped me as an American, and I really think would help other people, is to recognize that regardless of how you see people, everyone, even if they're not human, like animals do it too. Like everything that is living on this planet is pursuing its own happiness. Like everything, like the things that are able to laugh or have enjoyment or able to seek comfort, like instead of like knowing pain or removing itself from the dangers, like to recognize that something else has that is the first step. Like the first step is to realize as a human, like it is our responsibility to show compassion, which means you have to give up hate. We have to be able to provide kindness, which in my mind is the easiest thing because you it just means not to hinder someone else in their beliefs or what they're pursuing. Like you don't have to tell someone they're a terrible singer if they tell you they want to do opera. Um, and the other thing is just to not cause pain, which just don't harm. And in my mind, that just means to allow yourself to pursue your own happiness. Because again, and this comes with energy, like there's this, I don't want to go into it too much, but like my belief in karma and dogma is just on a level that I always had, even when I didn't have a religious string to anything. And if people in general could just find what it is for them to pursue their own happiness, they would realize that when they start pursuing that, they wouldn't be able to hate or hinder or harm anyone else who's doing it. Because at the most minute or minuscule way, if you're someone who's pursuing your own happiness and you cause someone else pain, you feel it. I don't care if it's you feeling like, oh, I'm going to be late, but if I cut this person off, I'll feel better. No, there's a part of you that literally knows for that second you just scared that person, or you just caused that person to be frustrated. If you think it's going to be fun to like flip someone off or yell at someone from a window, secretly you know at that moment when they have like their heart jump or like that startled feeling of like I've upset someone, you know that was you who actually felt that. So I think the easiest thing that all of us humans can do that would actually have us all come back, especially in America, because I'm going to be honest, I think the biggest thing that I personally have felt is, as an American, when someone tells me that I am way too privileged, or I'm a prissy princess. Oh, that one. Ugh. When someone tells me that, my first thing is to tell myself that I want to go to a space of safety. And I'm not gonna lie, America's super safe compared to like other places in the world. Like if we wanted to, we could huddle out in quarantine our entire lives and no one would ever question us. We would just order off Amazon or get Seamless to deliver our food. So again, we live in an area where you can't necessarily tell someone they're wrong if they don't ask that question. But what you could remind them to do, and I hope all humans remember this, is we are here to pursue our own happiness. And when everyone remembers that, and we start actually pursuing our own happiness, whatever it looks like, because Kate, your pursuit of happiness is completely different than mine, but I'm so glad it brought us together to have this communication. Because when we all start remembering that that is why we're here, we will start having what I would consider world peace. Because when people start pursuing their own happiness and there's no reason to hate or harm or hinder any other individuals, we will actually have that. And I think that is what's going to bring humanity back together.
Hmm, beautifully said, Janine.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Um, mm, so good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Janine, could you please share the best way our audience can contact you or follow you? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have too many different social medias. I keep it pretty much like the bare minimum. I've got Instagram, which is ninja underscore number 9 INE, so Ninjanine. And then on Facebook, you can find me at Janine Watkins. I do have 2 accounts, although if you find me at Janine Watkins, I'll add you on the other one. And then finally, YouTube. I started reading some of my excerpts and I've put them on there. And then a few of like interviews with some of my friends about what it was like to read my book, and also my brother, because he is like one of the biggest supports that I've literally known his entire life. um, and yeah, if you follow me on any of those, you can also find my email. I love writing people. And my email is sonderlives 2034, so 2034 at gmail.com.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah.
I will add that to our website. And
Yeah.
here's where we say, see you later, Janine. I definitely would love to continue our dialogue,
Yeah.
if possible, in the future about the underlying two issues that you mentioned, and I would like to debunk it with you.
I
Um,
would love
the
that.
one is marriage, and one is racism. And our intention is to bring humanity back to its original place of love and joy and peace. So, here where we say, see you later, Janine. And my name is Kate Emerald. I'm the founder of Life of Emerald, a global healing movement 2020. I can be found at www.lifeofemerald.com. My Instagram handle is lifeofemerald_s. Please reach out to me or Janine, and my email is lifeofemerald@gmail.com. All right, everyone. See you later. Bye. Bye, Janine.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank
Take care.
you. Thank you. Bye.